It's Lofree Flow, the sequel. Now, I bought the original Lofree Flow with my own money and reported on a ton of different issues that I found when reviewing it. This time, Lofree sent over their new Flow 2 for review, but don't worry, that's not going to change my personal honesty. You'll quickly see. In case this is your first time here, welcome. My name's Cameron, and I'm dedicated to bringing you detailed tech reviews in plain English. Now that we're into the back half of 2025, I'm also setting a goal of hitting 20,000 subscribers by the end of the year. At my current pace, I'm gonna need some help to get there. So if you find honest deep dives like this useful, please consider subscribing to show your support. I appreciate those of you who already are, but all right. We've got a lot to cover. Specifically, I want to figure out which of those existing issues they have resolved, which ones still persist, and also what new trouble they may have managed to brew up this time around. So let's jump right in. Starting with the build and design, there's a lot of similarities with the old version and one approximately 1 inch by 5 inch difference. See if you can spot it. All right, I obviously have to start by talking about this new addition on the right side of the board. This chunk of aluminum contains a status light on the front, the USB-C charging port on the side, and also a touch bar to control your volume. Lofree looks to be attempting to develop their own unique visual identity lately. On the Flow Lite, they added a bigger forehead with the logo displayed prominently. Now on this Flow 2, we've got this thick sidebar, which also has the logo. It's a confusing addition since I'm not sure that anyone really wants something like this. It makes the footprint larger, it gets in the way of your mouse on a small desk, and it's also too easy to hit the touch bar by mistake, either when using your mouse or when picking up the keyboard or moving it around. The marketing around this new release is all about community and building what the users want. I'm not sure I've ever seen such a missed mark because no one is sitting around saying, you know, it would be a great addition to my slim, low-profile keyboard with its space-saving design? Some extra material jutting off the side. Sorry for the blunt reality, but it's true. The whole case is made of high-quality CNC-milled aluminum, and it's just as sturdy as the last model. It's a bit larger all around, including the front height of the case, and in total, it's about 25% heavier than the original Flow. In addition to this white version, there is a black model available as well, but both use the same silver case. The aluminum used is even smoother and softer than before, with a 205 grit anodized zirconium sandblasted finish, whatever the heck that means. My assessment, it's smooth, but I don't really know if I care that it's got zirconium involved. Do you? The real question though is, did they address the first of our prior issues, the sharp edges of the original Flow? Kind of, but not really. Typically what we see from other brands is a shaved off portion of the corner, which makes the whole thing much more smooth and rounded. My understanding is that this process is called deburring, but I'm not an aluminum materials expert, so feel free to comment if I'm at all off base. The Flow 2 is still not deburred, but it seems like that sandblasting process did make the sharpness of this edge a bit better. So it's not what I was hoping for, but it is better than before. I just wish that they took some of the budget that they used for engraving their logo on the front and instead used it around the edges to make it a bit smoother. The next prior design issue was the lack of adjustable feet. On the Flow 2, single-stage adjustable feet have been added. Hooray! The design of the feet is very similar to the Flow Lite, which I think are brilliant because they use the same piece of rubber as a cushion when closed as when open. They also get bonus points this time for making the whole thing out of aluminum, including the entire hinge, and yet somehow it doesn't feel like a rough, scratchy mess. It is genuinely impressive how smooth and satisfying they are. The typing angle for the keyboard is a quite low 1 degree with the feet closed, great for those hardcore ergonomics folks out there. With the feet open, it extends to 6 degrees. As you'll see though, with the feet open, they extend far beyond the end of the case, adding about a ½ an inch to the back of the board and just generally not looking great. The third prior design issue was the power switch placement, which I thought was tough to reach without picking the keyboard up last time. This time, they actually made it worse. You probably haven't seen the power switch in my B-roll clips just yet. You might be thinking that there's no power switch like iQnix does on their boards. But no, the power switch is under the fold-out foot. That's right, so not only do you have to pick the board up now, you also have to open the foot to turn it on or off. A very strange choice. The final prior design issue was the charging port. This was a minor one where having a back-facing port with a 90-degree charging cable just didn't look great. Now that charging port is moved over to the side, which works much better with the included 90-degree cable. Moving on to the typing experience, this was the highlight for most everyone who had a chance to try the original Flow. So let's see how it is this time. First, there's the switches. Lofree continues to work with Kailh, and these newly redesigned switches look really cool. They have a sleek design, and the switch colors match to the color of the board. However, since they get covered up when you're actually using the keyboard, it's not the most useful place to spend a bunch of R&D time. But for a moment here, let's just appreciate the design work to make this fit the whole vibe of the keyboard. There's 3 new switch types for the Flow 2. The linear surfer switch is what I have. Then there's a tactile pulse and a silent linear void. There's no clicky option in this new style, but this board is cross-compatible with Lofree's older low-profile switches, the Ghost, Phantom, and Wizard from the original Flow, plus Spectre and Hades from the Flow Lite. In all cases, the actuation force on the new switches was decreased pretty substantially, leading to much lighter typing, but we'll get there. Jumping ahead slightly, one of the biggest issues with the original Flow and with Lofree in general is that they have never let you pick your switches at the time of purchase. This, sadly, is no exception. A white keyboard gets you linear surfer switches, black gets you tactile pulse switches. This is crazy that they still haven't changed this, and even crazier that the rationale seems to be based around having your switch colors match the keyboard color, which, like I said, is cool, but unnecessary. There is one change though, and that's the addition of a silent version, which will let you get the silent switches pre-installed. However, they are charging $10 more for the silent version compared to the regular one. And as confirmed in emails with Lofree, the silent version will only be available in white. Now, I love silent keyboards, and I loved the silent Hades switches on their Flow Lite, but you can buy the Hades silent switches or the new Void silent switches on a standalone basis. Do those silent ones cost more than the regular ones there? No. So why do they cost more to get them pre-installed on your board? I guess just because they can, and because they know that that's what people are interested in lately, since, as I've outlined before, silent switches are definitely a growing trend in the keyboard market. Overall, this is a slight improvement, but it's still frustrating. In addition to the inability to select your switches, another prior Switch issue was that if you wanted to get extra switches, they were both expensive and came exclusively in packs of 90. Over time, this has improved, with Lofree decreasing the cost of their switches and increasing the amount in each pack. Initially, it was $70 for a pack of 90, which wasn't enough switches to fully swap out the larger version of their keyboard. Now it's $60 for a pack of 106, a clear win on that one. I actually covered those changes previously on both YouTube Shorts and on my Instagram, so if you want to stay up to date in between these major review videos, make sure you're checking those out. Next, there's the keycaps. The shape and feel of the old keycaps were excellent in my opinion. For the Flow 2, they've made pretty dramatic changes, and I don't really like where they took it. The keycap material moves from a dye-sub PBT to a double-shot keycap with PBT plastic on top and ABS plastic on the bottom. One added benefit is that they've now got shine-through, very similar to the keycaps introduced on the Flow Lite. Although those use polycarbonate on the bottom instead of ABS, so these ones are slightly different. Typically, this change would be a positive, but my biggest issue with the material change is that the keycaps are now really light, and they feel hollow as a result. For example, the old spacebar weighed about 7 grams, and the new one is only 5 grams, so it's noticeable. I already mentioned that the switch actuation force got lighter. Combining that with these lighter keycaps makes typing feel so light that it almost feels cheap, which is weird on a solid aluminum keyboard to have a typing experience that fails to live up to that expectation so dramatically. They also changed the keycap profile. This new profile has a very large typing area with less rounded corners than before. I love a wide typing area, and these are good in that respect. But I also prefer more of a concave design where all sides tilt in slightly, which is what they had before. These new ones are more of a half-pipe type of shape, similar to a classic old-school cherry profile keycap. It's not my favorite shape, but if you're a fan of this type of keycap, then it might be an improvement for you. The font on the keycaps were a major issue for me on the original Flow. The font is completely overhauled here, using almost identical font to the Flow Lite. For the most part, it's a big improvement. Font choices are consistent across the board, which I think is important, but the letters are also very small, and the icons have the same little gaps that make them harder to read, which I disliked on the Flow Lite. In particular, I still hate how the play pause button is just a pause icon, and a broken up one at that. I always think that the skip track icon on F9 is actually the play button and hit it by mistake. Once again, the font is improved, but still has room for further refinement. Now on to the typing sound and feel. Let's see how this keyboard sounds with the linear surfer switches. The typing feel is good, not great. Lofree has been touting this board as having a feeling of typing on a cloud, which is humorously similar to when I referred to typing on the original Flow as typing on marshmallows. I'm not saying that I inspired their marketing, but you never know. I personally wouldn't describe this as cloud-like though, except that it's light and airy, which I suppose supports it. Typing is smooth, but really just insofar as linear switches are smooth. The super light switch with the super light keycaps make for a key press that's too quick to really feel smooth, if that makes sense. Like, smoothness needs some resistance in order to feel like it's smooth. Air is not smooth, but a surface can be smooth because there's some resistance. I don't know if that take will resonate with everyone, but it's the way that I feel when I'm using this board. Overall, it's too light for me, it bottoms out really easily, and it feels hollow in the process. I wasn't in love with the original Flow's typing either, so you can feel free to call me a Lofree hater in the comments, but with the original, I could see why people would like it. I don't see that nearly as much here. Despite that, the sound is great, and I'm sure some people will absolutely love it. However, one other new introduction here is some pretty aggressive metallic ping on some of the stabilizers. In particular, the Enter key on my board is the worst. Comparing it to other stabilized keys, I think it's caused by an inconsistent application of lube. Here is the left shift key, which has no ping. Look at all that visible lube. Now here is the Enter key, which has a lot of pinging, not much lube to be seen. So I could fix this personally, but for the price, I shouldn't really have to. So what about that silent version? Well, Lofree didn't send over the silent switches for me to test this time, but I do have the silent Hades switches from the Flow Lite. It's tough to say how similar the new silent switches will be to these older ones, but here is a quick listen to this board with the Hades. I am a big proponent of silent switches. However, since the stabilizers on this Flow 2 are prone to pinging, that issue can become even more prevalent when the switches themselves get quieter, which might be an issue for the silent version of this keyboard. Shifting back to the standard switches to wrap up this section, typing on the Flow 2 is smooth and very light. The sound is a bit clacky and the feel is hollow. It's not terrible, but based on the sky-high expectations for Lofree, based on their history, their advertising, and their pricing, I personally find it a bit disappointing. Moving to the key layout and touch bar, there are 3 different versions available at launch. This is the 84 key version, which is a common 75% layout. There's also a 100 key model, which is a 96% layout, and a familiar one to fans of the original Flow and Flow Lite. But just note that this model still has an undersized 0 key on the number pad, which can be problematic for heavy users of number pads. Finally, there's a new, smaller 68 key version that follows a 65% layout. The function row in this model remains unchanged from last time, providing a pretty common layout of multimedia controls and other functions. The only thing I would change is the backlight brightness keys, which could easily be moved to a function plus arrow key combination, freeing up 2 spots for other functions. On the prior model, an issue was that some function row buttons defaulted to their multimedia controls, some defaulted to regular F1, F2, etc., and in general, the behavior just didn't seem to completely align with how it seemed like it should based on the manual. Additionally, there was no way to customize and no function lock to alter the behavior. Thankfully, that's pretty much all fixed. On the Flow 2, all of the buttons behave as the F1, F2, F3, etc. by default, and all alternative functions require using the function button, so it's consistent, which is a huge win. Additionally, there is now VIA support for customization, meaning that even though there is still no shortcut for a function lock, you can manually make the changes in VIA if you really want to inverse that behavior for some of them or all of the function row keys. Now on to the touch bar, or touch switch as they seem to call it, which is new and included on every model size, even the small one. The touch bar is used to control volume. It can also be used while pressing down the function key to adjust screen brightness. It does not include a way to mute or unmute, and overall, it's just not that useful. It jumps up and down in increments that are far too large. I cannot get it to precisely go to a volume of my choice, no matter how hard I try, and it could legitimately get bumped while using your mouse next to the keyboard, especially if you have a small desk setting. And even more serious than that is how easily it gets adjusted from picking up or moving the keyboard. I didn't think that I did this a lot beforehand, but I certainly do. And when I do, my volume goes absolutely berserk, usually either maxing out or decreasing to nothing. In Lofree's defense, this is a really cool innovation, and they might be able to fine-tune it with some firmware tweaks, fingers crossed. I love to see when keyboard companies try something new, but unfortunately, as I said early on, I think this one is a miss. For connectivity, this keyboard continues to work with both Mac and Windows using key commands to swap between the two modes. Unlike before, where the Mac and Windows key markings were on a shared keycap, this time they've been separated with Mac keycaps coming pre-installed and Windows keycaps included in the box. An oddity though is that Lofree doesn't include a switch or keycap puller in the box. This is nothing new with their boards. However, it was already a little bit odd when they didn't include them before, since their boards have always been hot swappable. But now that they include separate keycaps for Windows, there's no excuse. There needs to be a keycap puller in the box at a minimum, and I hope that they add one before the Kickstarter actually ships. If I'm a Windows user buying my first ever mechanical keyboard, I'm not going to have a keycap puller laying around, and now I'm just going to have to find something around the house to pry the keycaps off with. That is not good for anyone. Next, one of the biggest issues with the original Flow was the lack of a 2.4 gig USB receiver, and thankfully, just as they fixed that with the Flow Lite, they have done the same here. There's nowhere to store the receiver on the keyboard when it's not in use, but at least it exists. In addition to the dongle, there are 3 separate Bluetooth 5.3 connections and a wired mode available as well that uses that side-mounted USB-C port. The switch underneath the foot has options for off, wired, and wireless. Once you're in the wireless mode, function +1, 2, and 3 control those Bluetooth connections, and function +4 is used for the 2.4 gig receiver. For polling rates, the Bluetooth connections are a standard 125 Hz, but both the wired connection and the USB receiver are capable of 1000 Hz polling for all the gamers out there. Finally, the last pre-existing issue with connectivity was the slow sleep to wake. This was an issue on both the Flow and Flow Lite, and it continues here. I measured the sleep timing to be around 10 minutes on Bluetooth, and the wake up takes multiple seconds to reestablish. Thankfully, this is not an issue when you use the USB receiver, so at least there is that alternative for a single device. But Lofree needs to address this. Ideally, they should introduce a way to change this timing based on your own priorities, battery life, or remaining awake. Worst case, they should add in a way to turn off the auto sleep. That kills the battery, but ensures that this board is always ready to go. I did ask Lofree if there was a way to do this and didn't hear back in time for this recording, but if they do happen to get back to me during the edit, I'll update it here. Customization is next, and this was yet another one of the major issues on the original Flow, since there was no way to customize your keyboard behavior at all. With the Flow Lite, they introduced a proprietary key mapping software, but now with the Flow 2, they have officially begun supporting VIA, which is a user-friendly, open-sourced customization platform, which is much, much better. This means that you can use the web-based VIA platform to adjust your function row behavior, add in macros, or whatever other customization you desire. An important note, though, is that this keyboard is not fully QMK compatible. QMK technically is the firmware that VIA is built on, but it's apparently possible to have a keyboard configured to support VIA without supporting all the other QMK platforms out there. I first saw this on the iQnix MQ80, before which I didn't even know it was possible. Having VIA is absolutely better than nothing, but it does mean that some folks out there who prefer to use other QMK tools may not have the compatibility that they require with this keyboard. Backlighting on the Flow 2 is similar to before, but much better in a couple of ways. It's still just white-only backlighting. It's very weird to not see RGB at this price point. Just like with the switches, it really feels like Lofree made many decisions based on what would make a cohesive look, rather than what would offer the best user experience. It's really form over function, which is kind of sad. The backlighting only has 3 modes: on, off, and pulsing. However, as you can see, the first improvement is the addition of those new shine-through keycaps. The second big improvement is an overhauled light diffuser on the switches, which allows the backlights to get much brighter than before. Even with the same 4 levels of brightness, the visibility provided by the backlighting is vastly improved. So even though the backlighting is simple, it's solid. The prior model also had some very underwhelming RGB side lights, which felt out of place in the design, and now they thankfully have been removed. Somewhat in its place is this new status light on the right side of the board, which is used to show battery and charging status. It flashes red when the battery needs a charge, and white when it's charging. Interestingly, this bright, easy-to-see light is not used for connectivity, like Bluetooth pairing. Instead, that's done by this little tiny light on the caps lock key, just like it was in the prior model. It's a minor inconvenience, but just feels like a missed opportunity. For the battery, the sizing differs by the model. The 68 key model gets a 2000 mAh battery, the 84 key version increases to a 3000 mAh size, and the 100 key model stays at a 3000 mAh size. Last time around, the batteries were only capable of about 40 hours of use, which is really low. Lofree hasn't released battery life numbers at this point for the Flow 2, but I would expect that this model would be at least a little bit better given the larger size of the battery, but it's still probably going to be on the lower side of battery numbers, at least compared to competitors. I did ask my Lofree contact if they had any battery life results to share, but they didn't get back to me in time for this filming, so again, I'll update it here if they get back to me during my edit. Typically though, when a manufacturer holds off on releasing battery numbers, because they're not that great. I promise that if they were getting test results approaching the 1200 hours that Newfie is advertising on the Air V3, they'd be shouting it from the rooftops. But we'll see once they release those full details. I also already discussed previously that the included angled charging cable makes way more sense with the introduction of the side-mounted USB-C port. The cable itself is a 5-foot USB-A to USB-C cable, and it's interesting. When you bend the cable, it sounds crunchy. It's like there's a layer of plastic in there that's getting crinkled like a potato chip bag. It also has a braided design, but the braided material is loose. It's like a sock that can bunch up in places. It is definitely nicer than before, but it still feels cheap and weird, and it falls short of expectations based on the price of the keyboard. Speaking of pricing, the MSRP for the Flow 2 is very steep. $189, $199, or $209 depending on the size. However, I don't buy these prices for a second. Now, if there's one thing to know about me as it relates to pricing, it's that I hate deceptive pricing practices. MSRPs should mean something, and in the past with Lofree, it has not. Let me explain. The last Lofree launch, the Flow Lite, had an MSRP of $130 for the 84 key model. Their pricing for the earliest Kickstarter backers was $70, advertised as a 47% savings. Even if you got in as a late pledge, you could still grab one for 30% off at $90. So if you were late to the party, but the Kickstarter was still accepting orders, you might have felt the need for urgency and jumped at the opportunity to save $40 off of retail. However, when the keyboard finally launched, it launched at $100. I check keyboard company websites pretty religiously, it's my job, and I've never seen it higher than $100. So the MSRP is not actually $130, it should be $100. And your backers that you care about so much should not be pressured into making a purchase with fake savings under a manufactured time crunch. For the Flow 2, the reason why I don't trust the prices is that I think, again, they are inflated to create the appearance of a better deal, both for Kickstarter purchasers and for non-Kickstarter purchasers. My expectation is that after the Kickstarter, this keyboard winds up priced closer to the original Flow, around $160 range, rather than those $200 prices. Which brings me to my next point. If you're watching this video close to the launch, you may be able to catch the Kickstarter for this keyboard and get it at a deep discount. But here are the issues with Kickstarter. Number one, as we just discussed, who knows what the real discount you're getting is, and adding time pressure to the equation causes customers to act irrationally, which I don't like. Number two, you may not fully understand what you're getting into as the buyer. If you got this far into this review, then by now you should know that this isn't a perfect product. But there are bound to be some much less comprehensive reviews out there that may encourage you to buy this keyboard despite the problems. I'm not saying that those reviewers' opinions are wrong or that you absolutely should not buy this, but what I do want you to understand is that real product reviews take time. And when you feel time pressure as a buyer, reviewers feel the same time pressure, which can cause expedited processes that may miss major problems. So that means that you, as the purchaser, may try to get in on that early VIP Kickstarter pricing, despite not having a complete and accurate picture of what you'll truly be getting. That's why the cynic in me assumes battery life is going to be bad since it's not yet been shared and makes my review less complete as a result. Some of you out there will probably purchase one of these without any idea of how long the charge will actually last. Finally, number three, you get a discount, but you also bear the risk as the purchaser. Lofree has a history of delivering on these campaigns, so you might not be worried, but anytime you back something on Kickstarter, there is a chance that you don't get what's being promised, and you don't have the same buyer protections that you would have if you were a regular purchaser. Kickstarter is designed to help new companies to bootstrap their way into a product via crowdfunding. In this case, an established company is instead kind of offloading financial risk onto their customers rather than bearing it themselves. But hey, you get to decide how to spend your money, and understanding all of those risks and proceeding anyway is totally fine. So let's review the differentiators and deal breakers. For positives, the design is clean, even if some aspects like the color match switches are a little unnecessary. The typing remains smooth and is a good experience overall, though not as positive as the original, in my opinion at least. There is a silent version available, though at a premium price. As you can probably tell, a lot of these positives unfortunately have some caveats. There is a 2.4 gig USB receiver, which includes 1000 Hz polling. There's improved backlight brightness. They added feet to give 2 possible typing angles. Finally, I am reluctantly adding the touch bar as a differentiator since it's unique and different, but it's also going up as the first deal breaker because it doesn't work well, it protrudes way off the side of the board, and it is far too easy to bump when using your mouse or adjusting the keyboard on your desk. Other potential deal breakers include the cheap feel of the keycaps and their shape, which isn't my favorite. The typing is too light, caused by both the keycaps and the new switches. The feel and sound are a bit hollow. There's pinging in the stabilizers and an inconsistent lubrication, at least on the board that I received. Switch type continues to be tied to keyboard color, which is insane for a $200 keyboard. Right, that's another one. Even though I don't believe it, this is apparently a $200 keyboard, which is at least $60 more than where it should be priced in my opinion. There's white-only backlighting. The sleep to wake is poor, the power switch is under the foot for some reason, and finally, there is no keycap or switch puller in the box, even though it supports both hot swappable switches and includes alternative Windows keycaps. As we saw throughout this video, there are a lot of things that Lofree has improved from the original Flow. However, there are a lot of problems that remain untouched, and there are new problems that they've created by forcing innovation that no one asked for, limiting customer choice in favor of a cohesive look, and providing materials that I think feel cheaper than before and nowhere near where they should for $200. In the end, this is not a keyboard that I would buy personally. Thanks so much for watching, subscribe if you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.